We now look at rules for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing common fractions. Let's start with addition. If two fractions have a common denominator, we simply add their numerators. For example, 1/5 and 2/5 have a common denominator of 5. So we can add them by adding their numerators. The answer is 3/5. We can see why by looking at the fractions as slices of a pie. With the pie cut into 5 pieces, we see that 1/5 plus 2/5 make a total of 3/5. The same idea applies to subtraction. For example, we can subtract 7/9 minus 2/9 to find the answer of 5/9. If the fractions don't already have a common denominator, we must give them one before adding or subtracting. For example, to add 1/2 plus 1/3, we need to write them with a common denominator. 1/2 is the same as 3/6, and 1/3 is the same as 2/6. So our common denominator is 6. Now we can add their numerators to get the answer 5/6. To summarize, we need a common denominator before we can add or subtract. We can then simply add or subtract the numerators. That is, a over c plus b over c is equal to a plus b over c. And a over c minus b over c is equal to a minus b over c. Let's turn to multiplication. Consider a simple example. If you start with a pie cut in half, and then take half of one of those halves, you have 1/4. The word of implies multiplication, so we found that half of a half, or 1/2 times 1/2, is equal to 1/4, which means we've multiplied the numerators, 1 times 1 equals 1, and the denominators, 2 times 2 equals 4. Let's do another example. To multiply 1/3 times 2/5, we again multiply the numerators and the denominators separately. For the numerators, we have 1 times 2, and for the denominators, we have 3 times 5, so the answer is 2/15. Sometimes we can simplify fractions at the same time we multiply them by canceling terms that occur in both the numerator and the denominator. For example, if we multiply 3/4 times 5/3, we can cancel the 3 that occurs in the numerator and the denominator, leaving us with the final answer of 5/4. We can write our general rule for multiplication as a over b times c over d is equal to a times c over b times d, remembering that it is sometimes helpful to simplify or cancel terms first. To divide fractions, we use the rule that division is the same as multiplication by the reciprocal. For example, let's divide 10 by 1/2. We replace the 1/2 by its reciprocal, which means we invert it and replace division with multiplication. You can see why this rule is often called invert and multiply. Now we find the answer, 10 times 2 equals 20. You can see why the invert and multiply rule works. Recall that 10 divided by 1/2 asks how many times 1/2 goes into 10, and the answer is clearly 20. Let's do one more example. To do 3/4 divided by 2/5, we invert the 2/5 to make 5/2 and multiply. Now we just apply the multiplication rule to see that the answer is 3 times 5 over 4 times 2, or 15/8. The general rule for division is a over b divided by c over d is equal to a over b times d over c. For reference, here is a summary of the rules that we've covered.